everyone! Today, Helen Wilson will introduce to us how to DIY a buckwheat burger step by step. If you like vegan food or you are trying to vegan food, it will be a good choice. Let's have a look.
So obviously buckwheat, I pre-cooked the buckwheat earlier because it takes about half an hour to cook. So this is roasted buckwheat. I turned it over dry in a pan first to roast it, and then I cooked it just according to the packet instructions. The recipe requires 115 grams or 4 ounces of roasted buckwheat. So that's the buckwheat there, and I cooked it, and if I feel it, it's just sort of soft and squidgy to the touch. There, buckwheat. Let's see if I can move this chopping board. Okay, talking through the ingredients of this healthy burger. And so then we've got some onion and mushrooms. Now, I've also prepped this earlier to save us some time. So I had, 225 grams of normal, close cut mushrooms, and I chopped them quite finely. And also had a red onion, and what I've done is I've cooked them in a tablespoon of olive oil, you see there. And I added a little bit of, oh no I didn't actually, I've got some here. I've got some vegetable stock here. So when it comes to binding these burgers together, the vegetable stock, if is needed, will add a little bit more liquid. So working down the list, we've got the roasted buckwheat, we've got onions and mushrooms. There's an option to put some little bit of red wine in there for flavour, but you don't have to. And then there's some nuts going in as well, and some spinach. So I thought that I forgot they're up here. I'm going to put some peanuts in this evening. The recipe actually says to put walnuts in, but I don't have any. And in my big shopping list of things I needed to get at the shop, somewhere walnuts just sort of vanished out of my consciousness. So anyway, a nutty burger is nice, so I thought we'd just use some peanuts instead. And some spinach. But if you look at the consistency of all these things at the moment, you've got this buckwheat, which is already quite soft and small. You've got the vegetables, the mushroom and onion, and they're cooked and they're small. So they're not going to really need much blending. But then you've got these big peanuts. So I thought what we need to do, start by blending the peanuts, and we'll blend them with the spinach, and then mix the other ingredients in. And the additional things that go into this burger for flavour's sake, my homegrown rosemary and sage, and then we're going to put in some of that gram flour again for extra binding if needs be. So can you see how I'm trying to explain that these burgers, whenever you're making a homemade burger, whatever you're making it out of, you do it in stages. Don't ever just chuck everything in at once, because you need time to assess if it's going to come together, if it's going to be too wet or too dry. So when you have these ingredients that add moisture or bring sort of structure to a burger, just add them gradually, because then you can correct. You're not sort of left in a situation where you've got a sloppy mess or something that's far too dry and falls apart in the pan. So that's it was 115 grams of walnuts. So let's do the same with the peanuts. My scales. Oh, nice little bowl. Right, zero the scales. Let's do 115 grams of peanuts. There you go. So I'm going to start by blending the peanuts, so breaking them up into small pieces, and then I'm going to add the spinach in, and at the end I'm going to put the other ingredients in. The peanuts are blended now, and they look quite like, if you buy a bag of chopped nuts, that's how small they are. So let's put in some spinach now. So this is already washed, this spinach. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough spinach actually growing in the garden to put in as much as I needed. Spinach goes in. Give the spinach a little blend. Right. Oh, there's some big bits that escaped there. So, I don't know if you probably can't see where I am back there, but with my Magimix processor I have a pulse button. So I pulsed the nuts and the spinach, because if you just put it on full speed and leave it, you're going to get a paste like a pesto, and it's far too wet. So that's why you have to do it in stages. So let's have a look at all the ingredients together now. If I get another mixing bowl. Just chuck in the spinach and the nuts. I think in the original recipe I used walnuts because it was developed as a mood food recipe, and obviously walnuts are really good for sort of brain health, and so that's why I used walnuts. So any sort of nut would do, but that was why I used walnuts in the original recipe. So this is our chopped spinach and chopped peanuts, buckwheat, which I cooked earlier, mushrooms and red onion, which were cooked earlier. Chuck that in. So let's put some flavour, some sort of aromatic herbs and things into here. So, rosemary and sage. I've got some sage from the garden. I've got 4 leaves. I think the equivalent, if you're buying dried sage, is a teaspoon of sage. I'm just going to chop this sage up. I've got enough sage to feed an entire town. And it's not really something I use that often either. Never mind. Sage. Rosemary. Oh, fresh rosemary. Just so nice. And this is again equivalent of a teaspoon of fresh rosemary. And as I said, I've planned and I made a wholemeal roll to serve these healthy buckwheat and spinach burgers in. And this is the oregano, and that's for the final recipe. Let's move that one out of the way. Right, let's give this a mix and have a look at its consistency. I've just realised we haven't got any salt and pepper in, so let's put a little bit of, oh, it's over here, isn't it? Let's put a bit of salt in, half a teaspoon of salt, shake of pepper. So, this is an example of a very loose burger mix that we're going to have to work with our binders to get to stick together. So have a look at this. Quite a loose mix. It just looks so delicious and healthy. In fact, you could just eat that as a salad, couldn't you? Looks really nice. So if we go back to our ingredients, let's have a look at the suggested ways to bind. So if you look through the ingredients, the liquids and the flour are what are going to act as a binder. We could do a flax egg as well, like we did with the falafel burgers, but let's try with the flour and some of our stock first of all. So I've prepared 140 ml of vegetable stock, which is what the recipe calls for. As I said before, I'm not going to just chuck it all in. What I like to do is add a little bit at a time and see how it starts to bring the mixture together. So here's my brown flour again. You could use soya flour. You can use just plain flour, but it gives things, I think, too much of a sort of stodgy, or tastes sort of too floury really if you bind with just a plain flour. So let's start with 3 tablespoons of ground flour. Mix that around. This is going to dry the mixture out a little bit. Yeah, more needed I think. 1, 2, it's 2 more. Should be doing this with a wooden spoon really, shouldn't I? Let's try that instead. someone who's made an awful lot of burgers before. In the vegan cafe that I ran a few years ago, I made all of our burgers from scratch and I shaped hundreds of little bit things. If you over mix and over squeeze a burger mix, that can ruin it as well. So it's a bit like, you know, how you treat a cake mix or anything like that. You've just got to be delicate with it and not hammer it too much. Right, let's see if this comes together. Oh, we're getting there. But sometimes these burgers can be deceiving. So have a look at that as a burger. Looks pretty good, doesn't it? Sometimes they appear to have binded, and then when you put them in the pan, they just all fall apart. So I want to make sure that that isn't going to happen with these. I think that burger needs to be a little bigger as well. So I'm moulding it, and this is the gram flour working, really. You think that gram flour is what binds, you know, the main ingredient in like pakoras and onion bhajis and things. It's got that sort of solidifying, binding quality. There we go, how about that? So that's a buckwheat and spinach burger with mushrooms and herbs from the garden. Let's pop that down there and move this mixture out of the way. So I didn't need any of the stock on this occasion. And a lot of things will affect how much liquid you need. Even if you follow the same recipe time and time again, the mushrooms might have given out more liquid when you were cooking them. The spinach might be more juicy, or sometimes it might be more dry. So that mixture in blending and cooking produced quite a lot of its own liquid. So I didn't need the liquid that was put on the recipe. But other times, like the first time I made that recipe, I did need more of the liquid. So you have to learn and sort of get the confidence to make a judgment on what ingredients are needed. So let me just move this spoon. Buckwheat burger. So let's cook it and then we'll assemble it. And turn this on. About a medium heat. Let's do this one in a little bit of olive oil, shall we? That reminds me. We're going to serve this with this halloumi alternative. So I'm going to cook it in the pan alongside the burger. Let's move this big knife. Let's have a look at it, shall we? Smells pretty good. So I'm going to take a couple of big slices like you would with conventional halloumi. Conventional. I shouldn't say conventional, should I? I should say animal halloumi, which I haven't had for years, so I can't really sort of make a judgment. But all I know is that when I tasted this the other day, it was just tasted fantastic, and it cooked well, cooked nicely, and it sort of got a nice sort of crispy goldness on the top. Here we go. Right, let's put this burger in. Now when you're cooking a burger such as this, you want to be really gentle with it. You don't want to chuck it around the pan, you want to try and keep it together. So let's place that gently there. And then this is it's a Tesco free from coconut oil alternative to halloumi, and it's made by Sheets. So thanks to them for sending this for me to use this evening, because it had actually sold out in the local Tesco's. There we are.